Well, let's move to an actually important topic, not me just roasting people who don't matter how much they deserve it. And that is what is happening in Atlanta involving the Stop Cop City movement, trying to stop this police training facility to promote police terrorism around the world. Of course, people may or may not have seen very major charges, RICO charges dropped on a number of activists in the Stop Cop City movement. And we are very, very happy to be joined here by Keyanna Jones, who is a community organizer in Atlanta. Keyanna, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. And, maybe I'll just start here for those who maybe have not seen the news or just maybe seen a few headlines. What is happening with these RICO charges that have been dropped on organizers against Cop City?
We woke up to news a couple of days ago that there had been RICO charges that were handed up in an indictment against 61 activists against Cop City. And many of those activists had previously been charged with domestic terrorism. These RICO charges are just as flimsy as those charges for domestic terrorism. We saw back in March people who attended a music festival being charged with domestic terrorism for simply wearing dark clothes and walking with a group. And with this RICO indictment, we see that mutual aid, solidarity, and food reimbursement are acts that can be considered in furtherance of the conspiracy. So there is a huge conspiracy for people to provide mutual aid, to give community resources, and to donate to bail funds so that activists can be bailed out of jail when they're arrested. A huge conspiracy that has to be thwarted right now.
I mean, can you explain just really quickly, like for those who don't understand what a RICO charge is? I don't think that's like a common, maybe it is to some people. Eugene's giving me a look, but I don't know if it's a common phrase or a common word that most people understand. Sorry, go ahead.
It is very common here in the state of Georgia. We know that we have a district attorney in Fulton County who has gone on record to say that she is a fan of RICO. She loves to use RICO. And now Attorney General Chris Carr has availed himself of a Fulton County grand jury to indict people under RICO. The Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act in the state of Georgia is very, very easy to pin on someone. In the state of Georgia, you don't even have to know someone personally or have made their acquaintance in order to be charged under RICO. What the RICO statute says is that a group of people have come together in a conspiracy to interrupt the operation of government in furtherance of a criminal act. And I'm sorry, I got the domestic terrorism in there when I said interrupt the operation of government. That is domestic terrorism. You're trying to stop the government from running the way that it's supposed to. But with RICO charges, these racketeer influence corrupt organizations supposedly get together and have a concerted mission. They're all working toward a common goal to further some type of criminal conspiracy. So I guess these people were all working toward the goal of making sure that community members could be provided for and that we stood in solidarity against Cop City. And that in and of itself is seen as a crime by Attorney General Chris Carr.
No, I think that's a very important point. And, for people who aren't familiar, RICO was designed for the mafia. So that means that they're bringing laws for the mafia to, community organizations, which in and of itself should tell you something. But, one of the other things that was very interesting to me about this, Keyanna, is that they dated the start of the conspiracy to the day George Floyd was murdered, which of course was well before anything happening with Cop City. But it seemed like that in and of itself was a statement from the Attorney General that it's, that he just views Cop City as part and parcel of a bigger, broader, criminal act that goes all the way back to the protests in 2020 that 27 million people around the country participated in.
Absolutely. And I think Attorney General Chris Carr is telling on himself and other government officials that that was the date that their conspiracy started to quote unquote put down these movements. Any movement that seeks to express dissent against the government, any movement that is in opposition of the status quo, any movement that is going to stand against the militarization of police, the privatization of police for corporate gain, which we know that they are there for. Anybody who dares to say, I don't agree and I'm going to speak out, Attorney General Chris Carr is sending a very clear message that this is not the wave here in Georgia. But what we saw after the date that George Floyd was murdered was that the inception of cop cities came about all over this country because their concerted effort toward a common goal to repress the voice of the people was then made known. This government came together under one mission to say, we are not going to stand for people rising up. And the thing that was so alarming was that the solidarity that was shown was something that they had never seen before. They saw Black people, white people, LGBTQIA plus people, poor people, indigenous people, Latinx people, all people standing against police terror. And that literally terrified them. So they conspired on that date and going forward to make sure that they would silence the voices of anyone who would dare to speak out against the corrupt nature of police militarization, the corruption of police repression, the corruption of over surveillance of Black neighborhoods, the corruption that we see happening with this proposal to build Cop City. There have been so many backroom deals. There have been so many illegal moves, all of which have been exposed by and by organizers, by activists, and people in the community at large. And Attorney General Chris Carr is intent on making sure that nothing more comes to light. And the only way that he knows to do that is by these bogus RICO charges.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also really important to emphasize here, like what you just said, which is like the extent to which the state of Georgia is going to suppress what is pretty widespread opposition to Cop City. And I think most of the people, a lot of the people who are watching are probably aware to some degree of what Cop City is or have heard about it. But really quickly, can you just give a brief overview? Because it obviously cannot be emphasized enough how dangerous this project is. I mean, not just for the state of Georgia, this is something that's going to be used for the nation as a whole. So can you talk real quick, what is Cop City and why should we be opposed to it?
Absolutely. Cop City is a $90 million plus militarized police training facility that would be set right in the middle of Southeast Atlanta in South DeKalb County, a majority Black neighborhood that's been the victim of environmental racism for a very long time. It would destroy 381 acres of forest land, also disrupt a very vital watershed that is the headwater of the largest water system in Georgia. It would also, in original plans, provide for a Black Hawk helicopter landing pad and a bomb testing facility right in a residential neighborhood. We know that since the original proposal that the helicopter landing pad was taken out, as was the bomb testing facility. However, they have plans to scale up the already existing firing range there where they will train with the Israeli Defense Force and other forces from around the country that come, from around the world that come from places who have very poor backgrounds on civil rights and human rights. What we would have is a militarized training facility where the city of Atlanta would not only train others, but they would be trained by outside forces in military operations on urban terrain.
Well, and Keyanna, to pick up on something you noted there about the helicopter piece and the bomb disposal thing, that seems like, in some ways a response to the fact that there's been a lot of outcry against this entire facility. But I know those two things were highlighted by a lot of people. But I think it does speak to the course of the resistance. I know many tens of thousands of signatures were just collected for a ballot referendum. I mean, so, talk if you could a little bit about the movement itself and the success it's had and the momentum it's building, which I think cannot be separated from the charges that were dropped this week.
Definitely, Eugene. I do believe that the press of the movement against Cop City was very instrumental in convincing those members of the Community Stakeholder Advisory Committee that a Black Hawk helicopter landing pad is not something that we need to have in a residential neighborhood that's situated between two schools. Neither is a bomb testing facility. It's already bad enough that who live in that area wake up and go to bed to gunfire. I know this for a fact because I used to live right behind the forest. I unfortunately had to move because my 8-year-old son was terrified of every loud noise he heard. And there would be times that we would be homeschooling during the day where he would just hit the floor no matter what he heard because this was constant in our home. But what people also have to understand is that the constant press of this movement has definitely gained momentum. It's brought people into a movement in a show of solidarity where we have shown up and made it very clear, not only to Mayor Andre Dickens and the Atlanta City Council, but to Attorney General Chris Carr and anyone who is watching all over the world, that we will not stand for our forests to be destroyed. We really want our land back because this is our land. We already recognize what environmental racism does to our community. And having people stand up the way we have and not back down is the catalyst for these RICO charges. The fact that the city of Atlanta and Attorney General Chris Carr are well aware that this project is not what the people want. The people have spoken. Not only did we come out to council meetings in mass, we have collected more than 108,000 signatures on a petition for people to decide. And honestly, I believe that these RICO charges are the last ditch desperation effort of the state to quell this referendum petition. The Attorney General has been back and forth in court with us and the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta, the mayor, and the Attorney General Chris Carr have sought to invalidate not only this referendum, but all referenda going forward. And I need people to understand what that really means. What they're saying is that the people would have no redress when they don't agree with decisions made by lawmakers. This is a very dangerous precedent, but what we see now, clearer than ever, is that fascism is at its peak in these yet-to-be United States, and that Attorney General Chris Carr has no problem showing the people his whole hand, because that is exactly what we see. These RICO charges are just one way that Attorney General Chris Carr is trying to stamp out the movement. But as he will see, and as the world will see, we can't be stopped. We won't be stopped. We believe in what we're doing. We are willing to fight for this in every way that we know how. We are using a diversity of tactics that has not been seen before in the state of Georgia. And I know for a fact that that's why Attorney General Chris Carr is afraid and why he wants to try to snuff out this movement, but it will never happen.
No, I think that's a very good point. And I think as we've gone along, we only see more and more support coming from various different, elements and organizations. And I think even in response to this RICO, I've seen, everyone from the most radical organizers to Fair Fight Action put out statements against the RICO charges. And I think that speaks to the broadness of what's happening there in the Stop Cop City movement. So for those who are watching, Keyanna, who are looking for more information or, if they so choose, looking to get involved, where can they go?
They can go to copcityvote.com. They can go to communitymovementbuilders.org. They can also go to stopcopcitysolidarity.com, and they can follow us on social media, the hashtag StopCopCity. They can follow Community Movement Builders and Cop City Vote.
Right on. Well, Keyanna Jones, community organizer, and I have to say, member of the fantastic Stop Cop City Choir, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. You guys were fantastic at the Socialist Rising Conference in Atlanta last week. You can check that out on our YouTube, Breakthrough News, by the way. But Keyanna, thanks so much for giving us some your very precious time here in the Freedom Side.
Thank you.